My name is Mary Green, and I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. We started Mary Green Promotions. Mary Green Promotions started with the Expo. It has evolved, and before long, we were starting to be asked to do other events, and we became this event planning company. Well, I was part of a member of 6 children in our family. My mom was a single mother. I was a middle child. So, I found out years later how hard it is for middle children. And now that's when I realized how hard it was for me to be a middle child with such enormous people that were older than me, as well as those that I had to take care of that were younger than me. So my mother was very strong. I mean, she worked her entire life, several jobs to take care of us. And I think through that, I watched her, I was up under her, always around her. I can cook because of my mother, because she taught me everything. So I think that definitely, being a strong woman, it came from my mom. Wow, I had many different jobs. When I thought about it years later, I was in every form of media. When I was back in Rochester, I worked for Gannett Corporation as a secretary. Actually worked in the office where there were all of the top executives for Gannett. Worked for the ABC affiliate, had my own public affairs television show. And then I came to Chicago and ultimately got into radio. So those were my first positions, but my first one was actually as a secretary for an executive of a big community affairs program in Rochester, New York. And he became the president of the National Black Media Coalition, which is how I got my interest in the media. One of the reasons I got into television is because there were no African Americans who were being hired in Rochester, New York in front of the camera. And so our organization, which was the Rochester Black Media Coalition under the national organization, decided to fight that. And we were actually going in and picketing all of the television and radio stations that were not hiring African Americans. This is back in the day. But through that organization, I was hired. They started to hire some of us, I think to keep us quiet, but they did, and I was taught how to produce television. One of my first jobs was working for PM Magazine, which was a magazine show back in the day, which nationally syndicated, but that's how I started. One of the things that I think has kept us going, even with the work that I do now with the Black Women's Expo, is that we give our sponsors, our supporters, exactly what we say. So, when people ask me, how do we keep going these many years? I mean, it'll be 30 years this year for the Black Women's Expo, is that we give you exactly what we say. And I was still at V103 Radio when I started the show. It was called An Expo for Today's Black Woman at that time. And 3 years into it, it just got too much for the radio station. So I was asked would you think about taking this show on the road or taking it on the outside and producing it for the radio station. So 3 years into it, we moved about 2 blocks down the street. My staff and I started producing the Expo for the radio station at that time. Many years later, then we became the full owners of it, but that's what started the business. I had never thought about going into business, didn't know I needed to know about going into business. I remember a couple months into it when someone from the city of Chicago came up to our office and says, "Where's your business license?" Didn't know I needed to have one, and didn't know it needed to be displayed on the wall. So they gave me some time to go get it, and we did. But never thought about going into business. We were kind of pushed. Well, I can tell you from the start, we never thought it would last this long. No one could have convinced me of that. The night before the first show, the first year, we were crying on the floor, I will say, sitting with a bottle of wine in the radio station over at River City, very much, just overwhelmed with what we had started. We had so many small businesses that were so interested in showcasing their products and services that wanted to be a part of the Expo, and all of the advertisers of the radio station were jumping on board to be sponsors. It was overwhelming. We had, started a Phenomenal Woman Awards Gala, so it was very overwhelming. So didn't know that it was going to last this long. We are 30 years later, we are still here. People say, when are you going to stop? We can't. I mean, it has become the platform for so many small businesses, so many Black women that they talk to us each year, 6 months in advance. When are you going to start to sell booths? They're ready to go because this is affordable for them. We keep it affordable. Even ticket sales. we've been able to keep them at a price that any woman, any man can come and be a part of the show. Mary Green Promotions started with the expo. We started producing that event for the radio station for V103, and 3 years into it, it became too large for the radio station. And I was asked to take it on the outside and be a producer and be a consultant and produce the show on the outside. So we started Mary Green Promotions. At that time, did not think the show would last that long, didn't know what I was going to do but the expo. We also took the world's largest steppers competition, which we created for Anheuser-Busch. We took that on the outside as well. And before long, we were starting to be asked to do other events. And we became this event planning company. But that was not our thought in the beginning. We were just doing the expo. So how it has evolved is that it has become the platform for many black businesses. Small businesses, large businesses have become part of the expo. And as many corporate brands that are sponsors of our show. We have about 400 small business exhibitors that come from not only Chicago, but from around the country. Many come from Atlanta, New York, California. So a lot of small businesses, and we have about 30 corporate sponsors that are part of the show every year. The Black Women's Expo is always at McCormick Place. We have been there from the beginning. And so we have grown now, and we're in one of the largest halls at McCormick Place. One of the greatest achievements probably is staying in business. I remember when the pandemic hit, so many businesses, had to fold. Even though our show was canceled 2 weeks before it was to happen. I think March 20th was the city shut down. Our show was the first weekend in April. And so everything had to cease. Our show was ready to go, speakers, sponsors, entertainers, small business exhibitors, and we put out an email and letter saying we will give all of your money back. So many of our small businesses said keep it and just hold it for next year. And that shows how important this show has been and how they trusted us to continue, and we did. When we first started the expo, we couldn't get callbacks from some of the contractors that we needed to do the show. We were looking for a general services contractor, and we called some of the big companies, never got a call back. They didn't believe, I don't know, at that time, 30 years ago, believe in this show. Believe it was, it was big enough for their firm. And so we finally got to a woman-owned contractor, and they were with us for a number of years before we moved on. But that was the biggest challenge, is whether we knew what we were doing, and we didn't. But we learned. We were taken advantage of. We know in the beginning. We found that out later, many years down the road. Some of the things we were charged for we didn't need to pay. Was not really a part of what you pay. Especially on the union side, we didn't know that we had already paid that in part of our package, but then we were charged again over here. So we went through a number of things, but it didn't stop us. Well, I think, the impact that I believe we've had on the culture is that we are the platform now that you can come and talk about anything. We deal with the issues, so our show is built around what is going on now. So I can't imagine what this show is going to be like in August with all that is happening in this country right now. Many of our sponsors are going to want to come and talk about that. Many of our speakers, many of our attendees are going to want to hear what should we be doing now. So we have become part of the culture in that way. Whatever the issues are, you're going to hear about them at the expo. I don't think about me in this. I never thought about probably what I wanted. When the history of Mary Green is written, I believe it will say that she thought about others.